Welcome, sports fans, to the Detroit Lions tomorrow. In this episode, I will preview the Lions game with the Tennessee Titans, go over the stats, the injuries, and have an interesting story or two for you and a prediction at the end of the show. In this segment, I want to talk about the Lions game against the Packers that was played on Sunday at Ford Field. It started out interesting enough. The Lions scored a touchdown in their first possession. The Packers came back with one of their own. And then the second possession, the Packers got another touchdown. And at that point, I was starting to wonder if the Lions were going to be able to stop them at all, or if the Packers would just start pulling away more and more so until it got to be a blowout at the end. However, the Lions were able to stop them, and they hung in there. And it was a 14-7 game at halftime, if I remember correctly. Or actually, it was tied at 14, at halftime. But then a couple of things happened in the second half. First of all, the Packers took over half the quarter on their first possession of the second half to take the lead 21-14. Lions came back and went 3 and out, and then the Packers chewed up 8.5, actually it was over 8.5 minutes on their next possession. And at that point, the Lions had only had the ball for, I don't even think it was a minute. It was about a minute, and the Packers already had the ball with about 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter for the balance of it. So it was incredible. The problem I had with that is the one Packers touchdown and that first possession to start the second half, there was a defensive holding call on the Lions where there was not a flag thrown, nor was there an announcement made. It was one of those, if you will, quote-unquote mysterious calls, or what I would call a rigging call to help the Packers win the game. In any event, it changed the entire complexion of the game as far as I'm concerned, because like I said, the Lions went 3 and out on their possession. The Packers came back and got another touchdown. And then the Lions were able to cut the lead to 28-21. But then, going into the fourth quarter, the Lions had the pass, a lot of you may have seen, to Marvin Jones Jr. by Matt Stafford, that was challenged by Darrell Bevell. I looked at that replay, I'd say 3 or 4 times. And definitely had one foot in bounds. But by the time he caught the ball, his second foot was clearly out. I thought it was a mistake by Darrell Bevell to challenge that, though I understood why he did it. The Lions lost that challenge. It cost him a timeout, which turned out to be crucial in my opinion. And then the other key play was, and this seemingly can only happen to the Detroit Lions, it seems like. And the last time I remember this, I'll get to in a minute, but Mason Crosby was able to kick a 58-yard field goal after the Packers had a holding penalty which backed them up after they were in field goal range. I thought they would punt, but they tried it, and he made it. And then it was only after that I started thinking about the fact when the Packers were talking about Mason Crosby's struggles at Ford Field, I thought, it was very reminiscent to me of 2 things. One I remember, the other one I wasn't around for. The first would be Justin Tucker's 63-yard field, or 62-yard field goal, I believe it was, in 2013, which was the 6th field goal of the Ravens, which won them the game on Monday night at Ford Field, in a game that I thought the Lions absolutely outplayed them and should have won, but didn't, in large part due to that. But there were other things that happened in that game where the Lions could have won as well. That, and then of course the Tom Dempsey field goal in 1970, the 63-yarder. And for those of you who are not familiar with this, at that time the New Orleans Saints did not play in the Superdome. They played at Tulane Stadium, where it got to be awfully hot. And not only that, Tom Dempsey was a kicker who had a birth defect, so he only had part of his foot. And if you were to see the way his shoe was with the open toe on that, you wouldn't think he'd be able to kick it 20 yards basically. But he actually had a pretty good career kicking. and he passed away earlier this year, actually, of coronavirus, for those of you who weren't familiar with that. But as I was saying, he kicked the ball 63 yards, and at that time the goalposts were still in the end zone, and I think it was Len Barney that was back there watching it go back until it went over the crossbar for the game winner. At that time, the Saints didn't really win a lot, and that was a crucial game for the Lions in 1970, though they still made the playoffs that year, but still it was a very heartbreaking loss. So then the Packers, with Mason Crosby's field goal, took a 10-point lead. The Lions came back and got a field goal to cut it to 7. And then there was about 3.5 to 4 minutes left in the game. I think it was 3:48, something like that. The Lions decided to onside kick it, which I questioned, to say the least. And some people would say, but Ed, they don't have a defense. They can't stop them. Why not onside kick it? And that's a legitimate argument to an extent. But my point is, why not kick it deep? Because if you can't stop them, which the Lions didn't anyway, why onside kick it? Your chances of recovering an onside kick are few and far in between. And besides that, the Packers could have added another score, which would have put the game conceivably out of reach at that point, with only a handful of time left. So why not kick it deep and see if you can stop them and make them punt? Because if you're not going to stop them, you're not going to win the game anyway. And that was basically my view on that. So yes, challenging the call and the onside kick were two things I don't agree with that Darrell Bevell did. Some of you out there may, but I just don't. I'm not saying that's what cost the Lions the game. I believe that questionable defensive holding call did, but still the Lions, in a sense, had an opportunity. I mean, they never led in the game other than after their first touchdown. You had a sense like it was going to be a close game after a while, but the way the Packers played it was very intelligent. And they came out and did pretty much what I thought they would do by throwing the ball more and running it less. In fact, the Lions actually did a good job with Aaron Jones. That they held him to 75 combined yards after he had 236, I believe it was, in the first game. So not a bad job there. But again, the Lions just have too many injuries and the like for them to have won the game. And then there are some other things I'll talk about later on that impacted that game as well. In the next segment, I will go over the stats for the Lions offense and the Titans defense. Stay tuned to the Detroit Lions tomorrow on Ed Sports Channel.